Hey there everyone, welcome to this video on JavaScript basics. Today I'm going to be talking about all the bare bone details you would need to know to get started in JavaScript, and these would be such as console logging, variables, functions, if statements, and while loops. So without further ado, before I do get started, I do want you guys to know that if you want to actually get started yourself, make sure you have a browser such as Chrome or Mozilla Firefox. Following with that, a compiler such as my preferred is Visual Studio Code. There are others out there, but I'm not too sure about them other than Visual Studio Code. It just works wonders. I would definitely recommend it to everybody. So let's get started on the basic structure of every JavaScript program. Actually, JavaScript programs are made of statements that are executed one by one. Each statement is followed by a semicolon, and multiple statements can be grouped together in a block which is enclosed by curly braces. I'm going to write a one-line simple JavaScript program using console. So I'm going to write console.log, and within the braces I'm going to write hello world, and ending it with a semicolon. Now in order to run this code, this is where the Chrome browser comes in this case. We would want to call the code from an HTML file. Now since this isn't an HTML tutorial, this is a .js tutorial, I am going to give you guys the file here. You can just copy paste it. It's very simple. It's only using the script which helps us call our file intro.js. So if you were to open your HTML, it will bring you to your Chrome browser, and then you can right click, inspect element. You'll see multiple tabs here. You would want to select console, and then you would hit a refresh. Now if you hit refresh here, you're going to notice that it says hello world as intended over here. Now there are other ways of logging your information into the console, and they are as follows. So you could actually do console.warn. Console.warn is another way of inputting your code, outputting your code. However, it will provide it in this yellow box. Now this is just a way of distinguishing what can be considered an warning, what can be considered just a normal log of output. Now what we can also do is we could log errors. So we could log our hello world, but this time in error format, which you'd guess it would be red. So in red we would have hello world here, and then we would have it in yellow. There's one more thing I do want to mention, is that there's something called a call stack. Now a call stack helps us find and trace the error from where it came from, or the warning from where it came from, and this would help you debug and understand your code better, and then also use that as indications of where to apply your fixes. So if you notice here, the error of hello world is coming from line 3 in our code, which is presented here. You can see the line pointed over here. So that is console log warn error. Let's get into variables. Now variables have multiple distinguishable features. They are containers that store data, and that data could be anything from an array to a string to a boolean, which is considered true or false, numbers, and more. So we'll start with var. Var is actually the very old version of calling variables. Now we'd want to call var, let's just call this variable message. Now message would be, in this case, just hello world, something very simple. And we'd actually be storing the hello world string in our variable message. Now we would want to log this information by hitting log, and then just typing in message here. This will print our message into the console as follows. Now the utility in here is that instead of writing hello world multiple times, in this case I can just write console warn message, and you'd notice that it takes message twice and it prints it out without us having to write hello world. We're actually writing less by using variables. Now when I was talking about variables and there's different ways to distinguish them, it's actually because there are 3 types of variables. There's var, there's const. Just gonna call this message 1, hello world const. And there's let. I'm just going to use let here. There we go. So the differences between var, const, and let. Const, ideally, once it's declared, you can no longer modify that message again. So in other words, you cannot change message 1 into hi. This will actually cause an error and your code will not run. So you would get an error here. Uncaught type error, assignment to constant variable. You can't actually update your message. But a let and a var can be modified. So in this case, if I were to modify my message to hi, and then I'll modify my message to hi 2. Hit save and refresh. You notice you'd see hi and hi 2 being outputted. This is because let and var are declared, and then you could also modify those for them. Let's get started into if statements. Now, if statements are a way of directing your code into certain conditions that you can provide, and these conditions can be written down in brackets for your code, and then on top of that, you can have multiple different statements in your if clause in general. So let's start with the age. That we'll put 18 over here, and I'll be using let because I might want to modify it later on. So age will be 18 in this case. Let's have an if statement here. And in our brackets, we want to put the condition age is less than 18. Now, if age was less than 18, we would want to output age is less than 18. Now, what this would do is that nothing would run in this case. Now, the reason why nothing is running in this case is because the age that is defined here is 18. And 18, in this case, is not less than 18. So we're not going to end up getting this case. How do we get into this case? Well, we can change the value here, which will give us the value out here. However, what if we want to have our age as 18, but we want a separate statement that would read when age is 18? So what we can do is we can write an else if age is equal to 18. So this condition would actually give us the result when an age is 18, and I'll print it out for us over here. So you'll notice it says age is exactly equal to 18 here. We could go further into this by creating else. What an else clause does in an if clause, in a whole if clause, is that it will print out the condition regardless of whatever other conditions there are. So if all conditions up above in that statement fail, it would resort to the else clause, which is presented here, age is greater than 18. So let's give it age is 19. Hit refresh. We would end up with age is greater than 18, which is denoted over here. So that's if statements. They can get much more complicated. You can have an if statement within an if statement, but that's not in the scope of this video. I will go later in depth on another video. Let's get into loops. Now, loops are a way of going through information until a condition is met, and they will iterate through multiple steps in order to reach that condition. Now, in this case, we'll use the example of I equals 0, and we would want a while loop. Now, while we would want to put in brackets, I is less than 10 in this case. And then within our curly braces, we'd want to have our code block, which is console.log I. Now, what this would do is obviously log I, and we would also want to increment our I multiple times. So what this does is you can either write I is equal to I plus 1, which works well, or there's a shorter syntax for writing an increment of a number, which is I plus plus. This is just a shorter way of saying I is equal to I plus 1. Now we'll hit save here, and we'll refresh. So what happens here is you notice that I is being printed all the way up until 9, this is because I is being incremented all the way up until 10. Once it's 10, 10 is not less than 10. The while loop will end because the conditions are met, and then that's how the conditions are not met, and then it quits the while loop. So while loops can be very complicated too. There are other types of loops such as for loops and a for each loop, but we'll not get into that for now. We'll get into that in another video. Let's get into functions. Now, functions are a simple way to define a code block to be used elsewhere and in multiple other scenarios. So I'm going to give you a case where we would actually want a code block. So I'm going to use let b equal 2 and let sum equal 5. Let sum equal a plus b. Now in this case, we have sum equal a plus b, and we don't want to constantly call sum a plus b every time we want a new sum. In this case, yeah, we'll get output of 3. However, what if we want to change this variable? So let's just say we want to change a to 2 and then 2. Hit save, refresh. It's a little daunting because we're changing variables and then we're changing a sum. However, what we can do instead is we could define a function here. We can get rid of this function and then sum. And in the function, how we define it is that after we declare it as a function, we'd want to make sure the parameters within the braces are defined. Our parameters act as input for our function, and we'll be using those. So a, b will be our parameters. Wrap it in a curly brace. We'd want to return a plus b. Now you notice this just return is whatever we end up giving back as output from that function. In this case, sum would be returning a plus b. So let's just make sure whenever we're calling it, we want to wrap this in its own braces, and then give whatever values you want for your a plus b. In this case, it will be 4 plus 6. When we hit save and we hit refresh, we're going to see it prints out 10. And now you notice this block can be used anywhere, and all we really have to do is just change the numbers in this sum. It's much simpler. It's from an outside perspective, it all only looks like we're just doing sum of 3 and 6, and it outputs immediately like that. So those are functions for you. They can become more complicated. You can have functions defined in functions and much more. There's arrow functions, which has been introduced in EMCA module scripts, but that will be covered in another video. So these are the bare bone basics of JavaScript, and I hope that helped with you guys on understanding a lot of the concepts, console.logging all the way to variables. There is one more thing, such as commenting. Commenting is not really something you'd be using in your code to make new things in your code for logic. It's mainly just for understanding your code better. So why might I say you need comments? Comments, I would say, are very essential because they not only help you, let's just say if you've not touched your code in a few months and you get back to it and you completely forgot how it worked, comments serve as a way to understand the code better. They're defined as I shown above with 2 slashes followed by whichever text you want. So hi, this is a comment. Now, you can actually define a multi-line comment rather than doing this. This is another comment. Rather than having 3 lines of comments and you have 3 slashes, what you can do is start the slash and then hit a star. And then wherever you want to end your comment, you end up with that star. Now that star slash will close the comment, so you notice it's not working here. We want to move this here. That gives us our comment. Now this won't change the utility or the functionality of our code. All it serves is to give you more context of whatever you're running over here. So usually how we want to have it in our code is have the comment right above whatever functionality we're trying to define. This will give us better context on it, and it would help us understand the code better, not only from our own perspective if we forget, but if you were to share this code with friends and they would not know or if it's too complicated, they do not know what that piece of code is actually running, it would give you better context. But that should be all from my end on the bare bone basics of JavaScript. Hope that helps with everybody. I will be having more videos out later on, and if you guys are interested, please do subscribe. Thank you so much, and have a nice day.